There was a time you woke up every morning with a fire inside you. Maybe it was anxiety. Maybe it was a voice in your head constantly whispering, push harder, prove yourself, be more. And then after months of therapy, after staring fear in the face and embracing the parts of yourself you were told to reject you, woke up one day and felt nothing. No pain, no panic, but also no drive. Just a strange stillness as if your soul had stopped performing. And the most confusing part, no one ever warned you this might happen. Carl Jung once said, "The collapse of the persona is often mistaken for depression. We're taught that healing brings peace, clarity, and rebirth. But no one told you about this phase, the space in between, where you're no longer who you were, but not yet sure who you're becoming. A silence between two worlds. A desert where the voice of the self is still too soft to hear, but the ego's shouting has gone quiet. You're not broken, you're dissolving. But this isn't the end. This is the death of a mask, the persona you've worn your whole life. And behind that shell, something is waiting to be born. But it's not rushing. It's not pushing. It's whispering. Do you feel it? That emptiness after long stretches of healing. The disorientation when fear no longer fuels you. The eerie calm like life is waiting for something and you don't know what. If you're in this place, please don't panic. Jung called it nigredo, the first stage of alchemical transformation, a dismantling of the ego to make room for something deeper, truer, more sacred. You haven't lost your motivation. You've simply stopped using the old fuel, fear, the need to be loved, the hunger for approval. Now your soul is waiting for a new source of energy, one that comes not from the ego, but from the self. In the next part, I'll share why the collapse of motivation is a sign of deep transformation, how Jung described the void and why staying there matters, how to tell the difference between depression and inner reconstruction, and what may be waiting for you on the other side of silence. If this video touches something deep in you, stay, because the silence you feel might just be the sacred beginning of something truly real. Imagine this for years, perhaps your whole life. You've been driven by an invisible force. You called it motivation. It woke you early, pushed you through skipped meals, urged you toward goals, made you run endless races against clocks that never stopped. But here's a truth few dare to face. Much of what we call motivation is actually fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of not being enough, fear of being unwanted. Carl Jung once said, "What is not made conscious will be experienced as fate." And in this case, what's unconscious is the very mechanism that keeps you running constantly. But then you begin to heal. You face the shadow. You meet the exiled child within you. You look straight into the eyes of the memories you buried. And something strange happens. You stop running. But instead of relief, you feel empty. The nervous system and the roots of false motivation. From a neurological perspective, the human body was wired for survival, not happiness. At the core is the amygdala, the brain's fear processing center responsible for the fight, flight, freeze response. It reacts faster than conscious thought. That means even when you believe you're pursuing a passion, your nervous system may actually be reacting to an invisible tiger, your emotionally absent mother, your never-present father, the rejection you experienced at 6. For years, your nervous system has relied on stress as its fuel. It released adrenaline to make you move. It diverted blood from digestion to reaction. It spiked dopamine to reward correct behaviors, overworking, people-pleasing, meeting societal expectations. But once you begin to heal, that system collapses. Without fear, there's no stress. Without stress, your brain loses the signal to go. And because your brain couldn't distinguish between stress and motivation, when the stress vanishes, so does your drive. This doesn't mean you're lazy. It means you're rebuilding from the roots. Psychological bankruptcy. When the old engine breaks down, you thought you loved your job, but maybe you just love being praised. You thought you wanted success, but maybe you just wanted to prove you're not worthless. And now that your old wounds are healing, you no longer need the praise. You no longer seek proof. What's left a truth quietly rises. You never really knew what you wanted because you never had the chance to live without fear steering your every step. Like an actor who's played a role for too long when the curtain falls, you're unsure who you are anymore. Have you ever felt that your success was simply a refined projection of fear? If no one was watching, expecting, judging, what would you choose to do tomorrow? If you're sitting in that emptiness right now, please don't stay silent. Because there are thousands out there waking up in the same spiritual hush, wondering, did I mess up the healing process? Share your journey not to overshare, but to connect. Because in this postmodern world of polished facades, truth is a revolutionary act. Your story might become a lantern for someone else still lost in their personal night. In the next part, we'll dive deeper into the concept of the void, the silence after the shadow subsides. Jung called it nigredo, the first stage of alchemical transformation, a state that feels useless but is actually fertile soil for the self to rise. And I'll share why you don't need to chase old motivation, but rather learn to hear the first whisper of a you that's never spoken before. Imagine standing in the middle of a forest at midnight. No map, no destination, no drive to keep you moving, only silence. Not the peace-filled kind of silence, but a thick, sacred stillness. One that makes turning back impossible and stepping forward uncertain. This is the stage Jung called nigredo, the necessary darkening of the soul before any true rebirth can occur. It's not clinical depression. It's the unraveling of old psychological architecture where the ego once commanded the stage, now quietly receding behind the curtain, making way for something deeper, something ancient, the self. Nigredo, the necessary spiritual death. In ancient alchemy, nigredo was the first phase of transforming base metals into gold. It symbolized decay, decomposition, the fertile rot from which new life could emerge. Jung adopted this image to describe the threshold you cross after facing your shadow, a state of paralysis, of seeming pointlessness, of feeling utterly lost. And yet beneath that lies the groundwork for rebuilding your entire being. You lose passion for the work you once adored. Old relationships begin to feel hollow. Goals that once fueled your days now feel alien, as if you're watching the life of someone else entirely. Comparison, dark night of the soul in Christianity and Sufism. This state isn't unique to psychology. In Christian mysticism, Saint John of the Cross called it the dark night of the soul, a sacred night where the soul no longer feels the presence of God. No prayers, no guidance, only divine desolation. But within that darkness, the soul learns to walk without proof, a pure journey of faith, where the small ego dies so the true soul may be born. In Sufi tradition, Rumi wrote, "Don't run away from the grief. O soul, look for the remedy inside the pain." The message is echoed across traditions. Darkness is not to be conquered, but inhabited fully. Though a psychologist, Jung reached into the same sacred terrain seen by mystics and prophets. No genuine awakening is possible without passing through the death of the self. Neurological shift the brain during nigredo. At the physiological level, this stage often coincides with a drop in dopamine, the chemical tied to anticipation, reward, and drive. When you stop chasing external stimuli, your brain receives fewer signals of excitement, and the parasympathetic nervous system, often suppressed by chronic stress, starts to activate. You begin to slow down. The modern mind calls it stagnation, but to Jung it is the sacred retreat required for the self to emerge. Remember Sarah, the woman who went through shadow work, EMDR, inner child healing. After her wounds integrated, what remained was not joy, but emptiness. "I feel like I'm waiting for someone to tell me what to do next," she said. But no one came, because guidance no longer arrives from the outside. It is slowly forming from within. If you are in this stillness, know this: you are not alone. There's a quiet community of souls walking through this same dark night, learning how to no longer flee from shadow. Share in the comments. What are you feeling right now? What once motivated you but now feels meaningless? What whispers are you beginning to hear from the silence? Your story, whether short or long, might be the torchlight for someone else still wandering in the night. In the next part, we'll begin exploring the emergence of the self, that deep, quiet force in you that does not arise from achievement or approval, but from inner wholeness. We'll explore, how does the self speak? How can you tell its voice from the obsessions of the ego? And why silence is often the first true sound of your soul. There is a strange moment that many who have done deep shadow work will recognize. It's not a euphoric high, but a weightless unease. You're no longer sad, but you're not joyful either. You don't want to die, but you can't quite find a reason to live. And you begin to wonder, am I depressed again? Clinical depression versus existential emptiness, a subtle but vital difference. In medicine, major depressive disorder is diagnosed when symptoms persist for at least 2 weeks. Total loss of interest, extreme fatigue, worthlessness, suicidal ideation, sleep disturbances, appetite, changes, difficulty concentrating. But many who've gone through profound healing don't fit those boxes. Instead, they feel empty. No more anxiety, but also no more drive. No more dark thoughts, but also no more delight. Life flows steadily. You eat, you sleep, but inside, a vast white space. Jung called this the silence of the self after the collapse of the ego, a rebuilding phase where you're no longer bound by the old masks, but the self has yet to fully step forward. A psychological limbo where you've stopped performing, but haven't yet discovered who you truly are. Clinical reflections, what psychologists say. Dr. Lisa Miller, Columbia University, a pioneer in clinical spirituality, describes this state as a temporary disconnection from the old world, where the motivational system has been cleansed, but the new meaning hasn't yet taken root. Some therapists call it the existential vacuum. It's not dangerous if understood correctly, but it's easy to misread it as a relapse into depression. The self doesn't shout, it whispers. The ego is loud, it yells, be successful, be loved, prove your worth. But the self, it whispers. It doesn't create impulse, it creates resonance. Someone who has lived long under the shadow's grip may struggle at first to hear that whisper. It's soft as a breeze, delicate as intuition, slow as dawn breaking through a dense forest. You don't suddenly know who you are, but you start to notice a beautiful cup of tea that moves you, an old house that invites you to pause, a forgotten song that brings tears for no reason. That is the self beginning to speak. David, once a high-powered architect, used to live for million-dollar projects. Now those blueprints feel hollow, until one aimless walk led him past an abandoned building. No goals, no strategy, no expectations. But something made him return, to sketch, to sit, to be. From that stillness, a new project was born, not to prove his brilliance, but to restore the quiet beauty he saw in that forgotten place. If you're in that empty space, please don't panic. Don't rush to label it failure or depression. It may be the self beginning to speak to you in a language you've never learned to hear. Leave a comment under the video. When was the last time something small made you feel unexpectedly moved? Is there anything, however faint, beginning to call your name? This community is for those who refuse to live on autopilot, who no longer want to run on fear, who are waiting for something real, slow, and deep enough to live for. In the next section, we'll explore rubido, the third phase of psychological alchemy, where the red light of the self begins to color everything you touch, where you no longer have to try to be someone else because you finally begin to live as yourself. You've walked through the dark, you've sat in the silence, and now at the far edge of that desert, a dawn begins to rise. Not dazzling, but gentle enough to warm something deep inside you. This is rubido, the red stage of psychological alchemy, when the self, your truest, deepest inner being, begins to rise, bringing with it a motivation, no longer fueled by fear, pressure, or praise, but by life itself. The self begins to move you from within. Unlike the persona, the mask you wear for the world, the roles you play to earn approval or avoid rejection, the self doesn't need a stage, no spotlight, no performance. The self simply calls softly, and you listen not with your mind racing deadlines, but with your heart. Maybe you once wrote marketing emails for money, fame, performance. Now you write because something subtle inside you insists, not for 1,000 likes, but because this sentence, this story is part of who you are. And often it's the smallest, quietest impulses that mark the beginning of a whole new horizon. Yet not everyone walks forward. Some afraid of feeling worthless without a hustle turn back. They panic in the pause and sprint back to old cycles, deadlines, KPIs, metrics, just to feel alive again. But what returns isn't their self, it's a repackaged persona. And soon the fatigue returns. The hollowness deepens. Because now they're not only chasing someone else's path, they're losing themselves in the process. The neuroscience of rubedo, rebooting from within. So what actually happens in your brain once rubedo begins? The dopamine rush from chasing KPIs, paychecks, or praise fades. Instead, your body begins producing oxytocin, the hormone of connection, trust, and belonging, whenever you act in alignment with your true self. Your parasympathetic nervous system, long buried beneath chronic stress, reawakens, bringing calm presence and mental clarity without the constant tension. Your prefrontal cortex, the brain center for self-awareness and choice, starts firing more clearly. You stop reacting automatically. You start choosing from a deeper place of value and truth. The story of Emily. Emily, a top-tier marketing strategist, once won awards for performance. After her shadow work, she felt so empty she nearly gave up. But instead of forcing a comeback, she surrendered to stillness. One day while jogging in the park, she saw a little girl struggling to read a picture book alone. Her mom was busy, no one was helping. Without any reason, Emily sat beside her and read. They smiled, and something ancient inside her stirred a joy with no goal, no outcome. Weeks later, she started tutoring children at the local library. No business plan, no personal brand, just stories, books, and her heart. And strangely, her energy returned. Each day felt bright, full, not from ambition, but from presence. This is the self, not screaming, but showing you how to live. What is calling you quietly now? If something inside you feels more alive than your old passions, but you're afraid to name it, let this comment section be your soft space. It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be clear. It just has to be real. What small thing is quietly stirring your motivation again? Have you felt a subtle nudge from yourself recently? Have you ever drifted back to your old hustle, then returned and realized something deeper? This is more than a place to leave words. This is a place where your voice is heard. In the next part of this journey, we'll explore how to turn rubido into daily embodied action, not just a fleeting feeling. Build daily rituals that sustain your inner self, even through doubt. Balance external responsibilities with the sacredness of your inner life, so you don't collapse back into a false persona or float away in a dream that doesn't root you. Are you ready to start living not to impress, but to express the self that has always waited beneath the surface? You have emerged from long dark nights. You have learned to sit with emptiness. And now, like a gentle yet powerful tide, the self begins to surge, not in spectacular bursts, but in a soft, steady dawn of being. As Jung wrote in the Red Book, and suddenly the flood came, not roaring, nor violent, but deep and consistent, lifting all that lay beneath it, so that it could be born anew. This is the self rising not with fanfare, but with transformative presence whispering, I am alive. I am me. The irresistible wave. You stop doubting. You stop asking, should I? You simply act. A project, a phrase, a step you didn't plan, but you must do it. Not for applause or reward, but because your heart is singing without the need for instruments. A natural wave arises beyond your resistance, beyond your rational. Don't respond it to only by holding trust in action. Acting from self versus ego, motivation. Self-motivation, fear or expectation. If I don't do this, I fail or lose value. Inner truth, I restore the old courtyard not to be seen, but because it carries a story worth telling. Try this small experiment over the next 24 hours when you feel you should do something. Pause and ask, is this self calling me or fear pushing me? If it's self, you'll breathe deeper. Feel peace, a small thrill. If it's ego, you'll feel tension, compulsion, or the sense that you must do it, or you'll disappoint or vanish. Fear when the self emerges. Some hesitate even after negredo fear keeps them from following self's tide. They doubt they are good enough or that others will accept this new self. They wrap themselves in persona again, stronger than ever for safety. The result, they find themselves living a subtler version of the old lie. Tired yet never truly known themselves, because once they did dare, they never admitted the truth of it. Neurology of the self, a renewed brain. Neuroscience shows when you act according to inner values, the brain rewires itself. Prefrontal cortex, amygdala connections balance out. Oxytocin increases bonding you to your true self and authentic values. Dopamine no longer drives achievement addiction. It becomes a gentle catalyst sustaining long-term joy. What remains is clarity without caffeine, enthusiasm without hype, all carried by a steady inner stability. Let the wave of self connect us. If you're feeling subtle waves from self, a hidden idea, a quiet longing, share it with this community. What project is slowly taking shape? What made your chest whisper, "This feels like me"? When you followed that wave, what did it offer? Peace, gratitude, gentle excitement. You don't have to be perfect here, just honest. Your honesty, written and shared, may give permission to someone else to stop chasing stale expectations and live a more colorful life. What's next in this series? In our final section, we'll seal this journey with daily practices to nourish the wave of self so it becomes sustained presence, not fleeting inspiration. Ways to honor authenticity in relationships, work, and identity without collapsing into persona nor drifting into fantasy. How to cultivate a life that is neither rushed nor stagnant, but a warm, slow, authentic flow. This conclusion won't just offer advice, it'll offer a promise of a life lived fully, one that aligns with who you truly are. Remember part 1 where we explored the amygdala's role in fear. Now we expand the shadow awakens. Not only fear, it also gives rise to synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that Jung called expressions of the self unfolding in life. Subtle messages from the self. Before the self fully rises, it sometimes writes to us in gentle ways, a song on the radio, a passing comment, even a stray number. Imagine you're unsure whom to thank for supporting your shadow work journey. Suddenly you notice a streetlight numbered 777. Then a song plays with the lyrics, "Thank you for being here." That's no random coincidence. It feels like a loving reply. You are not alone. You are valued. That is synchronicity, the self reaching you. Jung said, synchronicity is not mere coincidence. These moments whisper, you're on the right path. Stay steady. When the nervous system resets, shadow work calms the nervous system. Your amygdala relaxes, the parasympathetic heals. This inner calm becomes fertile ground for noticing synchronicities. It's not that you become hypersensitive, it's that your mind finally quiets enough to listen. Remember Sarah? After her therapy, she wandered into a healing fair. She heard the name Quiet Presence 3 times in one afternoon. Every mention tugged at her heart. That was synchronicity calling her. When she bought the book and read it nightly, she found light emerging again. Synchronicity versus depression. In clinical depression, people may feel the world is meaningless or see negative signs everywhere. But after shadow work, synchronicities are gentle nudges. Oh, that feels familiar. How to notice synchronicity. Keep a synchronicity journal. Note 1 to 3 unusual coincidences, daily numbers, songs, phrases. After a week or two, you'll see the self sending you letters. Ask yourself in the morning, what do I need to hear today? And then stay open. Share with the community. Notice something odd that stopped you today. Write 2 to 3 lines in the comments. Share with us. What synchronicity caught your attention today? Did it feel like the self calling your name? Have you ever ignored a sign and later wished you hadn't? We're more than listeners. We're readers of soul mail. Looking ahead. In the final part, we'll learn how to live alongside the self daily, not by abandoning responsibility, but by letting inner truth lead. You'll discover how to weave small acts, writing, speaking, eating, loving into living aligned with the self. How to return gently when persona pulls you away, No shame, just awareness. How to sustain synchronicity, creating habits that keep the soul language flowing. This is the culmination, a living fulfillment of healing. Not just surviving, but truly being you. You have journeyed with us through shadow's darkness, the unsteady silence of Negredo, the emptiness so rarely spoken of. And now you're beginning to glimpse the enduring glow of yourself. If lately all your old goals feel hollow, if you sense you're standing at the brink of something real, yet can't name it, know this, you are not lost. You're in the midst of coming home to yourself. Carl Jung once wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart." Who looks outside dreams? Who looks inside awakes? When you're no longer driven by unconscious desires and start to hear that gentle calling from within, that is no ending. That is a beginning. Quiet, deep, unwavering. There is no fixed map for this journey, but you are never alone. There are thousands, maybe millions who are waking, re-examining, learning to live real, slow, and profound lives. If any part of this video struck a chord, a nameless sadness, a small glimmer of hope, a memory you thought lost, please share it in the comments. Not just because we want to listen, but because your story may be the lantern for someone else feeling strange or lonely. Where are you on your journey back to yourself? What tiny moment recently made you feel called? What synchronicity stopped you in your tracks? When you share, you're not just speaking your own truth. You open a doorway for others searching for meaning in their own silence. If this space feels like somewhere you want to return to, where psychology meets spirituality, where Jungian symbols live in real life, then subscribe to the channel. Not to follow another psychology channel, but to enter a community of awakened souls. We can't promise all the answers, but we promise to keep asking the right questions. Questions deep enough to invite you to stay with yourself longer. Hold on to this moment, the one where you don't need to pretend, don't need to prove, just be present. Because as Jung said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. If you're hearing this, chances are you're already beginning to touch that privilege. See you in the next video where we'll explore how to sustain connection with the self through everything we do, writing, speaking, loving, resting, all while staying true to the deepest essence within.